Hey girl, stop breathing. You're right on time. Ride this wave, let your heart unwind. Ooh, here's your space, your truth, your sign.
Every day at noon, I'd leave the office, I'd get in my car, I'd drive the same road to grab some lunch, and every single day I passed a big yellow sign on the side of the street right next to the Kentucky Fried Chicken. And just a name with 2 words, Yoga Center. I noticed it every time and made the same mental note. Someday I'll go inside there and I'm going to find out what's going on in there. And I did that same routine for almost 2 years, I think. Meanwhile, on the outside, my life looked like real progress. I had a business I was building with my partner, who was also my husband. Goals were being met. Every box I had checked was critically important. 2 entrepreneurs in a startup, easily working 12 hours a day, grabbing food on the way home, passing out long enough to get up and do it all over again. And it was awesome. But underneath all of that busyness, a feeling I didn't have a name for was always lurking in the shadows. It wasn't depression. It wasn't burnout. Exactly. I was too young and too early on the process for that. But it was something quieter and more persistent, like a compass that wouldn't stop spinning. Like something in me was trying to get my attention, and I kept telling it, just wait. Just wait. Maybe you know that feeling. Maybe you've been driving past your own sign for years. If you're honest, you've probably been telling yourself some version of this, that the restlessness you feel is a problem with your attitude, that women around you seem satisfied, so something must be off with you, that your roles as a partner, a professional, a mother, a caregiver come with non-negotiables, and your job is to meet all of them. I know that's how I felt, that your needs are too much on top of everything else, or at least that it's easier not to look at them, that you should be grateful, and the fact that you don't mean something is wrong with you. I didn't feel depressed. I had so much energy all the time. I was really engaged, but I felt disconnected. Just anything outside of my daily agreed upon goals was not allowed on the list, and that little voice nagged in my head. It was like, just think of it like a thoroughbred horse with blinders, right? That was me. And that disconnection does have a name, and it's not failure. I call it threshold. About 2 years into that daily routine, I mentioned the yoga center sign to somebody in the office, a woman that worked with me. And turns out she had noticed it as well. And so one evening we agreed, the 2 of us were going to take a small group of coworkers and go over there and find out what was going on at the yoga center. When we got there, the receptionist was busy, not particularly warm. There were forms to sign and shoes to remove, and someone asked us if we'd brought a mat. None of us had. And the room smelled of incense that had been burning earlier. The carpet was kind of a dusty orange, and the walls were warm and kind of dark. And on the far wall from when we walked in the room, there was a large yellow mandala, like a rug or a quilted mandala that was on one side of what turned out to be an altar that had curtains drawn. So something private happening there that we couldn't see into. And off to the side of the room was a small little bookstore. And it was filled with spiritual texts and, gift objects and things. Mostly I didn't even know what it was. What was in there? I had no idea. The whole space kind of had a quality that I had never encountered before. It's peaceful and very settled. Calm, like I'd never experienced before, I think. Certainly in my daily life, I didn't have that kind of calm. And then something happened while I was standing there in that foyer for the first time that I still wonder if I have full language for it. But the moment I stepped across into that room, something in me moved inward, went inside. There was like a depth there that I hadn't touched or been aware of touching before. And I was kind of unconscious for a moment of my surroundings. And inside my head, I heard the words clear and ancient. They were, "You are home. You are home." It was all I could pay attention to. And I recognized the words, but it wasn't the place and it wasn't the people. It was something older than that. The way you recognize a voice from a conversation you'd forgotten you were still in the middle of. And I didn't know who the voice was. I would find out later it was likely my teacher that I'd been in a relationship with on a yoga relationship as a student for 50 years. And the yoga center is really still the organizing principle center of my spiritual life. So I began practicing yoga at least 3 times a week. And within 2 years, I was meditating twice a day. And that's a practice that's never stopped for 45 years now. And it turned out that I was really restless. That restlessness inside of me was like a navigation system that had been trying to bring me home. And those words, "you are home," meant a lot to me. I felt them at a very deep level. But unfortunately, my ex-husband didn't want me going there. My mother told me I was too big for my britches from the time I was born. That was not uncommon, so not surprising to me at all. I was told I was too much, too smart, too something my whole life. But standing in that room and going deeper into that practice of yoga, and something inside of me had just stopped believing all of the stuff that I had been told. And I knew beyond a doubt at that point that I was not too much. I was exactly what I was meant to be. And I was at the very beginning of finding out who that really was. And yet, even with yoga, even with meditation becoming the daily anchor in my life, even with that interior knowing that had been confirmed the moment I walked through that door, the old operating system inside of me kept running, especially at work and during, my ambitious times, especially anywhere that required me to compete or produce or prove myself. That inner workings was still there. Because I was raised by a sports coach. My father's operating system had one setting: head down, eye on the prize, never quit. So willpower was the currency I trusted above everything else. And I was good at it, really. Relentlessly, exhaustingly good at it. Being competitive had been ingrained in me from a very young age. And it was unquestioned as part of my nature. It was just completely familiar. And I applied it to everything, including, if I'm being honest, the parts of my life that really didn't require it at all. I didn't know how to be different. What I couldn't see was the cost accumulating beneath the surface of living that way. I had learned, the way so many women learn, to make myself fit inside of a system that wasn't natural for me. I was operating on systems built around different kinds of energy entirely, to compete, to perform, to push through, because that's what survival in a professional world looked like for me. And I was a survivor, for sure. And I chose to survive on those terms in that way. In hindsight, I look back and I say I had no real relationship with my own feminine nature. I had no idea how to ask for help. I was a lone wolf by conditioning, not necessarily by choice. I didn't know how to do it any differently. I could only see those things that I'm telling you now in hindsight. And the restlessness I was still feeling, that persistent kind of unnamed something that the yoga had quieted, but not really resolved, I kept converting it into fuel, pushing harder, doing more, feeling like I could go further with the way I was operating at that time. The compass inside was still spinning, right? And I was still mistaking it for an engine, for my energy, for my practices. And 9 years of practice later, and I still hadn't let it change the way I actually lived or the way I behaved, who I was at the time. And so 1 week before my 35th birthday, my body made a decision that I hadn't really authorized. Without warning, it just stopped. My heart just stopped. I lost consciousness at home while my 4-year-old son was watching cartoons before school. I was sitting at the time, and the fall forward is what the doctor said likely saved my life. It restarted my heart. I crawled to the kitchen and reached for the wall phone, called a friend. She arrived and took me to the hospital where my heart failed multiple times on the way in there. And the last time that it failed, I was standing at the hospital, entryway when they ask you for your all your ID and all of that stuff. And I remember saying to her, "I'm going again." And whoever was behind me must have caught me because that's all I remember. And that last time was when I visited the other side and had a near-death experience. So I woke up on a table inside the emergency room and eventually put into ICU. And the doctors told me that I needed to have a pacemaker or this kind of event, my heart just stopping when it felt like it or felt like it didn't want to work. It could happen again. And, I had a 4-year-old child at the time, so taking that chance was not an option. What happened during that NDE, what I moved through on the other side of consciousness, is something that I write about in my book, which I wrote in 2015 called Always Choose Love. And I'll tell the story a little more maybe in the next podcast. Because I don't want to focus on that experience in this one. There's other things that I want to say first. So we'll talk more about that in another time. But what I'll say here is a little simpler. It's I came back from that experience different. That sounds really simple, but it was not simple by any means. It was a fundamental change that I've been working with and defining and growing with ever since. The question that crossed back with me wasn't, what do I need to accomplish? That was gone. It was, what does it mean to live from love rather than force? And again, that's in hindsight, right? Being able to live the last 35 years and understand what actually happened to me on that day. So I was learning how to leave willpower behind and live my life from my heart. That's been the major crux of my spiritual transformation in this lifetime. Yeah, and we'll talk more about that because it has a lot to do with why the Conscious Rebel was born. That question of how to live from love rather than from force, power, willpower, trying to push your way through everything. That question became the spine of everything that followed for me. And it would take me decades. I'm talking 30, 35 years before I really understood what was happening. Not because I wasn't trying, believe me, but because some things it's impossible to know until you live through them. This is an example of, getting to the gate and having to go through it and just keep moving until you end up where you're supposed to be. And my spiritual practice up to that point had been preparing me for exactly that question. I hadn't known what it was preparing me for. So I lived it. The restlessness that I'd been feeling all those years wasn't a weakness, though. It wasn't ingratitude. It was my deepest nature refusing to be quietly erased. And it took a machine in my chest to make me stop performing the way I had been since a young child long enough to be able to hear it. So as you can tell, the NDE was a big transforming experience in my life, and we will talk about that more. But here's the interesting thing about happiness that I actually did a little research on. And across cultures and decades of data, human happiness follows kind of a U-shape curve, right? Across a lifetime. And it tends to be relatively high in early adulthood, and it dips through the middle decades, the 40s and 50s, sometimes into the 60s, and then it rises again in the later years. So it's quite likely that you listeners have experienced something similar in a pattern to what I'm talking about. So it rises again in your later years, and the researchers who mapped out this curve didn't set out to explain the restlessness. They explained the dip in the middle, that season that gets labeled as a crisis, which was certainly for me a crisis, as midlife unraveling. It's not the end of the story. It is the bottom of the curve. It is the arc turning back upward. It is the moment before the ascent. True for me. And what many women experience at this point in their lives is the sense that old scripts have stopped working. This is one of the reasons I started Conscious Rebel. The scripts that we used to use when we were younger no longer work for us at this stage in life. So this is just, and I bring in the curve because I wanted to just use it as an analogy. This is the curve beginning to turn back upward, where we change our lives in a way that we begin to understand who we are and how to express it. Women who learn to read the signal of the U curve, they stop diagnosing the restlessness as weakness or something wrong with them. And they start to understand what genuine inner authority means. And it's a hard one clarity, oftentimes. It's a life that finally fits the person who they truly are rather than the person who they were taught to be. That sounds easy, but it can be really confusing and challenging time to go through. So just remember, you were never too much. You were never not enough. You were at a threshold that no one had the language to name for you. The door was always supposed to be open. We're going to talk a lot more about the Unconscious Rebel. Here is the practice that shaped more of my inner life than almost anything else that I have learned. Notice life without naming it. Short little words, right? But I want you to try it. Notice life without naming it. So to just try to put focus on what it is I'm saying. The mind is an extraordinary diagnostician. The moment restlessness arises, it has a verdict ready and the judgments begin. And the monkey mind chatter is endless. It starts yapping about how you're falling behind. You made the wrong choices. You should be further along. You want too much. You're ungrateful. The monkey mind doesn't wait to be asked. It files its report immediately, and we spend years living inside its conclusions. And if you notice life without naming it, you won't do that. So what meditation has taught me is 50 years of practice has continued to refine this, is that thought is not the truth. The label is not the thing. Between the sensation and the story, your mind builds around it, and there is a space. And in that space, I think it was Dr. Wayne Dyer used to say, the gap. In the gap lives something that is neither the restlessness nor the verdict about the restlessness. It is the one who is watching. In yoga, they would say that's the observer. That is the observer. Notice life without naming it. You get in touch with the observer in you. This is a step towards moving towards your higher consciousness and your inner being. So just take a moment to find a space right now if you can. Of course, if you're driving, this is not for you. Do this when you get home. Just slow your pace noticeably. This is a shift from teaching into presence. Find a comfortable position. You can be seated, you can be lying down, You can close your eyes if that feels right, or not if you don't want to. Or just let your gaze kind of soften, maybe out in front, straight out in front. Our teacher used to say if you're looking straight out, that was just your awareness. If you're looking up, you're tapping into superconsciousness. If you're looking down, you're tapping into the subconscious. So look straight out or up. And begin to notice your breath. Don't change it or try to correct anything. Just simply find your breath. What is it doing? Pay attention. Put your attention at the tip of your nose. And just sense your breath coming in and out of your nose. And let yourself settle into that rhythm. Let yourself sense that single entry point of breath coming into your body from the soft edges of your nostrils, a gentle rise and fall in your chest. Just notice that beautiful air, life-sustaining for your body, coming in and slowly going out. In through the nose, out through the mouth. And when a thought arises, and it will, do not name it. Don't call it anything. Don't even pay attention to it. Bring your focus back to your breath. The awareness of life entering your body. One breath in and out. Now gently just bring your attention back to the room. And this space that you just visited between the sensation and the label is where your inner authority lies. It's always been there. You just have to find it. You have to practice finding it. And you can do this exercise. Take this one with you. You're walking down the street, you're walking in nature, this is a beautiful one to do in nature where you'll see a bunch of trees or, whatever is going on around you, waterfalls, whatever it is, look at it and sense the beauty. Take in the beauty, take in the breath, but don't name it. Don't say there's a tree, there's a bush, there's a rabbit. Just be one with it. Very important exercise to understand how the observer works. It will help you in your spiritual practices. So here is what I want to leave you with today. The woman who was told she was too much, me, me. The woman who was told she wasn't enough, me, are both standing in the same place. They've both been living under someone else's verdict for a lot of years about who they are and what they were allowed to want and have. And at some point, that verdict stops for all of us. And for me, it's been quite a while now, but it does stop for all of us. And I think, and I hope that some of our listeners here are understanding and feeling what I mean, or you're long past what I'm talking about and on to what it is that you can do with your life, being in connection with that inner authority. And so be patient. We will get there. We women were never meant to follow these scripts all the way to the end. We were meant to observe them, live inside them long enough to understand them, and when the time came to step off and begin to teach ourselves how to be authentically ourselves. And that time is now. Not someday, right now. The inner self, the observer you touched just now with the breath practice, already knows who she is. She's not confused. She's not lost. She has simply been waiting for you to stop running, striving, thriving long enough to be able to hear her. And your restlessness was never the problem. It was just a single signal. It was a compass. The sound of a door about to open, right? And now you're paying attention to that inner self. And the conscious rebel doesn't fight what she feels. She listens to it. Because she's learned through experience and loss, through everything that it cost her to get here, that the deepest nature is not the obstacle. It is the way. So before you go, one thing I'd like you to try this week is notice one moment when you override what your body is telling you. Not trying to fix it, not analyzing it, just notice. And instead of pushing through, pause, listen to your body. Take 3 slow breaths like we were just practicing. Paying attention to your breath coming into your nose and how it feels in your body as you breathe in. Just like you practice. And ask yourself, what is this somatic signal trying to tell me? What is the somatic signal trying to tell me? That pause, that breath is the threshold that I entitled this story. You have to know what's on the other. You don't have to know what's on the other side. You just have to be willing to stand in that moment and receive. So, lovely listeners, if this conversation landed for you, I want you to know there's more where this came from. I write a weekly newsletter over at the Substack platform. So go there, look for Conscious Rebel or Cathy Lee Taylor, and you will find me. It's actually cathyleetaylor.substack.com. It's free. Sign up for the newsletter. You'll get my newsletter every week free. When do I deliver that? I think on Thursdays. Tuesday is a podcast, Thursday is a newsletter. But that's where I go deeper into these kinds of ideas. You'll also find personal essays, practices, things that don't make it into the recordings, but things that are important in my life, lessons that I have learned, things that will help you along your own spiritual journey and awakening. And that's where the real conversation lives. We're actually going to do some lives on Substack, so please join the community there. I would love to have you with me. Okay. I guess that's it. I'd love to know when you're in the room. Join me over on Substack. Welcome to Conscious Rebel. And let me just say, I'm so glad you walked through the door. See you next time. If something settled in you as you listened, that's enough. You don't need to do anything with it. Just let it land. Until next time, I see you. Be fearless. Be authentic. Be the rebel you are.